Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Dorsey's Resource Channel. The title of this video is going to be Strawman Artificial Person, Is It Real? What I plan to do in this video is delve into the rumors, fact or fiction, that contrary to popular belief, some of you have heard. I won't go into all the details dealing with the so-called redemption, also known as or sovereign citizen movement, that there's this mythology that you have this artificial person. And I'm going to attempt to answer that and actually prove with evidence from online as well as resources that I have that there is truth to this so-called rumor. And this is going to debunk all of the haters out there and trolls and gatekeepers who are lying, giving false, misleading information. I'm someone who studied in this movement. I am not officially a part of any organizations. I don't have a card carrying membership. There's certain contracts I'm going to say I enter into. There's those that I don't. I still do have a driver's license, a social security card. However, people don't understand the legality of certain things, and I'm going to delve deep into that. And first, before we get started, I want to say too, because what I'm getting into, this is not to be construed as legal advice. Okay, so as I normally start off, I give a disclaimer. This video is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her homework and research regarding the matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In the event you need to seek a competent professional, it is encouraged that you do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource Channel is not liable or responsible for any misuse of this information. With that being said, all rights are reserved. And also, please be advised that this is in the use of fair use practice in case there's any copyright infringement in the event. Content creators, we do reserve the right to use references for commentary purposes because some of these definitions or laws or images may be trademarked and in no way, shape, or form is Dorsey's Resource trying to take legitimacy over that copyright or whatnot. So just keep in mind that it applies to under fair use in the event for commentary purposes. And this is what the purpose of this video is for, and to provide education and also entertainment purposes being on YouTube for those of that nature. So please understand that I'm invoking this is in reference to that law because the statutes are copywritten in reference to fair use. Now let's get started. The term natural person refers to a living human being with certain rights and responsibilities under the law, excuse me. By contrast, a legal person or artificial person is a group of people that is considered by law to be acting as a single individual. Both natural and legal persons are entitled to sue other parties and sign contracts. They can also be on the receiving end of a lawsuit. It says to explore this concept, consider the following natural person definition. Now, this is research, this is online. Says definition of a natural person, individual, human being. So what I'm going over, I don't want to sound, in case I sound monotone to some of you guys, what I'm going to break down is there's a distinct, separate division, legal separation between dealing with the court system and how we engage in regular conversation with average everyday folk. There's a distinct difference. When you go in a court of law, there's a set of rules, procedure that they go by. And once again, this is not legal advice. What I'm going over is to prove that you've been doing contracts your entire life. You've been doing commerce, but when you engage there's a go-between that you have when you've engaged for most of your life in these different various contracts. Some of you all are aware, some may not be aware, whether knowingly or unknowingly. That's why one of the things they say, ignorance of the law is not acceptable. And I'm going to go, I may jump around a little bit, but I have some definitions, go over as well, some other terminology that's related. Okay, straw man, it says up here with this particular document. This document, by the way, what you're looking at right now is from Cracking the Code second edition. And as you see, it says, I'm going to read bits and portions, so just follow me. It says a public corporation right here. It says see public corporation, a corporately colored juristic person. And it says a straw man, a utility through which said goods and services may be transmitted. That's how you engage in these contracts, believe it or not, out here, whether it be your driver's license, your social security card, your voter's registration, if you have a marriage license, if you've ever been married before, if you have a concealed carry license or permit, these are forms of contracts and they're attached to your legal person. And they've actually used that terminology. Now, I've heard in the court system, because straw man sounds more esoteric, and this is why in some of the videos I've heard people going before court and the judge would say, what are you referring to? They have plausible deniability because there's certain words and terminology that they use, and if you come in there talking regular English, many are not aware, or some of the terms is not followed in their procedure. They have what's called plausible deniability, to act like they don't know what you're talking about under the color of law. There's a case, you can do research on this. I'm already well studied in this area. Look up the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case of 1938. The concept, what I'm going over, it changed all of the courts in this country from common law, those that hadn't been converted over, to de facto courts under color of law, which gave them the ability to also construe the law as they see fit. The basis was out of common law, is also known as God's law, where statutory law comes out of. I won't go into all the details, but you can look up. Common law is basically like the grandfather, the basics, kind of like with the Ten Commandments or the Constitution will give you a blueprint, just a basic blueprint, and you carry from there. And what we have today from that case is statutory law or color of law, which can also be construed or perceived. It can be twisted around. Like the term attorney, you slow it down, look up the etymology of the word attorney, and it says a turn, attorney, a turn on you. There's games that they play with these words in the English language. Library, was a breakdown that was given at these classes I attended years ago, that libraries to lie and bury the truth. Library, attorney, a turn on you. There's a trickery with these words and the way they have a separate legal connotation applied. And you might say, what do I mean? What am I talking about? Okay, I'm going to try to clarify some more. For example, growing up, I explained this to a good friend of mine on numerous occasions. It's a real simple example that when we were in grade school, English was some people's favorite subject, just like math was, and some people didn't like English. But English, taught you grammar, but grammar had rules to it. You learned about nouns, verbs, and things of that nature. Like nouns are from a place. But let's take the word understand. And the definition that we learned in the Webster's Dictionary is separate from the Black's Law Legal Dictionary. Now, the Black's Law Legal Dictionary is for those terminologies and definitions they use in the court, the judicial system. So I was told many years ago, I'm not just told, encouraged to research this. I did my research and looked at this and got testimonies from people, actual events from numerous people that had been in court and used a particular method. I won't go over that for the time being, but just keeping it real simple. I don't want to get too far off track because I have a lot to cover in this video. I don't know if I'm going to even have enough time because it goes in depth, but I'm just dealing with the definitions to show that this straw man is real. They do use the term legal person, but the term understand in the Webster's dictionary, when we were taught in elementary school, we were taught the word understand means to comprehend. And that is true, but did you know it has a separate legal meaning behind it? Did you know that understand in the legal realm or in the court system, if you're ever hauled into court, or say if you actually pulled over by a police officer, which happened to me years ago, I remember when I got my first speeding ticket in Allen Park, Michigan, the officer kind of went through, and they're trained similar to lawyers in a way with certain terminology. And he said, you do understand you were doing 70 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. And I would say, yes, sir, because I was nervous. I was scared at the time. I was coming from work. And didn't say back then there were other people speeding, and they had those traps where they get the speedometer from the bridge. But the term understand, did you know you were taught it means to comprehend? But unknowingly, when you say, I understand, you're saying, yes, I agree to that contract. See, they're not telling you this other side. Once again, understand means in the judicial court system, it means I accept. So when the officer said, sir, you do understand you were doing 70 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. You do understand this is illegal. So what he was doing, he was getting my acquiescence. He was getting me in a habit of agreeing. That's why the system, the grade school system, and why they implemented Common Core, what I've talked about in previous videos, is to dumb down the general population. And I highly recommend parents out there, if you do have the ability, to do your level best to homeschool your children, because many of the school systems, they actually have a disclaimer now. They don't have to actually educate your children anymore. I forget what it was specifically. Some of you all out there are aware and know what I'm talking about, because I had a friend of mine that brought this up. I don't have any children myself, but a friend of mine does, and there's some out there that know that the school said, it was announced, I believe, even on the news here locally in Detroit, that they said the Detroit public school system said they don't have to be responsible for properly educating your child or guaranteeing that they're going to get an adequate education. You know, so isn't that something? So this is why a lot of parents have moved on over to homeschooling their children. And unlike the ruling class elite, I hear allegedly that their children are sent to private schools by invitation only, and they also are taught by their parents. Of course, they receive the real information. And what I'm kind of going over is going to it's going to pierce the veil. It's going to get really in depth. So you're going to have to do your best to follow me. But those who are watching, you can read the document so far. I'm going to see if I can pull up. This is also a freestyle as well. There's another document that says, as I was going over the contracts earlier, I'm just going to jump to this middle paragraph right here. It says, as you will discover, the Social Security number is a public number belonging to a public persona, a person, a legal entity different from yourself, and artificial as well, existing in contemplation of or by force of law alone. This is your alter ego, all capital letters, written name, straw man. See glossary. It says is a legal term for a frontman or nominal party to a transaction existing in name only, which allows the owner to accomplish some purpose not otherwise permitted. A straw man serves its owner slash master with the slavish devotion, but you did not even know that you had one. He had been running around obligating you and entering into all kinds of unconscionable contracts and causing you much grief, heartache, and economic misery. It is time you get to know this fellow and set things straight. This manual will show you how to discover your straw man and bring him under your control instead of theirs. Scroll down some more. It says most people understand that the law is very precise. I used to, many years ago, by the way, for those of you all who may not be aware, I used to go over this document, at classes that I was asked to speak at. I was one of the youngest people there at the time, when the internet was not as prevalent like it is today, where you have smartphones and tablets where many people had access to. I used to go to private classes to learn this information. Once I found out, there was a friend of mine referred me back in 2004. There was like a group, they were activists, and it was on the east side of Detroit, and they had collaborated. They were actually separate tribes or separate activist groups, and it was at a place called the Inner City Sub Center, which is like a form of a recreational center. And they would have classes. A lot of African American men and women would show up from all walks of life, different ages. I would see women there with their children, in their strollers, or their, what do you call it, like their car seats that they have them in. I can't think of the other name, but you know what I mean. People with corporate America badges come to receive to get the information, and that's what helped woke me up. And I was back, wake me up back in 2004. There was a group there. They were the Nubian Nation of Moors. And no, I am not affiliated with the Moors at all. However, I do appreciate them taking the time out to share the information at the time. And there's different factions or different groups or different denominations or divisions of Moors too, by the way. So let's be clear on that. I did give a disclaimer, but I'm just going over a background to show validity and credibility. There was a sister, her name was Paula at the time, from what I remember, and she would go over critical information. And it's also where I first heard about the voter registration. And my friend of mine had even reference to, I mentioned in some of my previous videos, that she was a former police officer. And she stated that they taught her back then how to deal with so-called sovereign citizens. Now, mind you, the term sovereign citizen is an umbrella terminology, an umbrella term that is used to make people look like they're crazy or bad in a negative sense. Well, you might have something that's really going on that is actually real, but it's used to steer people away, to scare them away. Because there's a lot of urban legends and spookism behind evolving around that. And with my time in the movement, and it was just a movement, and my research and experience, I had to correct some people that there's some information they're highly misinformed about. Very strongly, and I have evidence, and I'm going over evidence right now. This is the reason why I'm doing this video. And I will also reference to Yusuf L's YouTube channel that has very excellent, high-powered educational information on this topic that goes in depth. But also this particular meeting, Paula, I found out years later, she had a brother there named, I knew him as Ben David, and he was with the Hebrew Israelites. So you had the Nubian Nation of Moors there, the Hebrew Israelites, and then there was a guy by the name of Bobby L. He trained he had a school that the classes moved to from the west side, because they had another activist or group started utilizing the facility, the time period, so they had to move. But he would attend those regular classes to help give the information to many minorities, people of color, our melanated brothers and sisters out there from all walks of life, or who prescribe to be, I'm using different terms, Black or African American, which are also descriptions to and have legal meanings behind each one of those names. When you delve into the etymology of each one of those words, actually, they don't really depict true nationalities. And this video is, I'm not going to get into that. Like I said, this information gets very in depth and can go into a lot of different topics. So you have brother Ben David, he was with the Hebrew Israelites. Sister Paula, she was with the Nubian Nation of Moors, and they mentioned that at the event. And there was a brother named Ishmael. He was with the Yamasee Moor. Yamasee, he would say Crete Nation. So they were like another faction, another group that was there, and they would go over various methods and education. Now, mind you, back then, a lot of people did not have access with the information. That was not as available as it is today, because it was sort of underground, and a lot of people don't understand Two, this is on a side note, and it's important to know this, that a lot of investigative journalists and people who study very in-depth etymology, eschatology, and different things had to piece this information together because the ruling class elite or the global syndicate did not intend for the average commoner, as they called, or U.S. citizen, to learn or know about this information that I'm going over. So let's just be clear on that. There were a lot of people who contributed, who had sacrificed because there were people that did things they didn't understand. There's still rules that govern the private sector, and you have to, keep that in mind. It's like a balancing act where there's also this information was not a silver bullet until years later. There was new information that was discovered that was from people sharing their trials and errors. Is how information got perfected as far as what worked. You also had whistleblowers or people that were from elite families or worked in government that also gave the in-depth researchers and advanced people the ability to connect the pieces to the puzzle together to formulate certain procedures. And some processes don't no longer work anymore, and some procedures change because the ruling class global syndicate has the ability with their control of the banking system to change these various methods and processes. So I understand the frustration out there. No one is, any one of us are responsible. And that's why I do give a disclaimer. And I don't, in case you are wondering, I do not give legal advice. So this video, I'm sharing this as a courtesy of my own free will. So please do not send me emails at this time asking for legal advice or saying you want to speak to me in person. I appreciate the acknowledgement, but however, I'm just sharing this solely as a courtesy. So please keep that in mind. And I do give a disclaimer because this information is sensitive, and you have to have the ability to comprehend, have a high comprehension level. And people with a higher IQ generally can comprehend things much greater than people with the lower IQ. This is just a fact. I'm just keeping it simple, So to go back over where I was reading, it's saying the English language and its accepted rules of grammar are likewise precise. However, make no accommodation for proper nouns to be written in all capital letters. The all capital letters name, which appears on your social security card, driver's license, passport, bank statement, credit cards. Remember, these are the contracts I spoke about earlier, which is rigidly enforced by the legal system, also known as the judicial court system, is not there by mistake. That's why the reason this is in circle, as the law is very precise, in circle again. But it is not your true name, which appears with only the initial letters capitalized. The all caps version of the name, this is a typo right here, of your mirror image straw man, and is written in another language entirely, legalese. That's another term they use for the separate code they use within a court system, how they define words. They created basically, it's like a language within the language. Like, even though we use the language, we were only taught one side, how the words apply just in general. That many words that we use in the English language also have a separate, distinct legal definition, which many people are unaware of, which I went over one of the terms just now when I went over understanding earlier. So you see how this goes in depth, and this is kind of like a freestyle. So in this document, we're on PDF 40. It says, in all capital letters written name is an artificial construction and designates an artificial person existing only by force of or in contemplation of law. The problem enters in when a man or woman mistakenly believes that such a corruption of their true name refers to him or her, a calamitous case of mistaken identity. However, all law to be law must offer remedy and recourse. The private form of the UCC offers such remedy. The Commercial Register UCC filing office is located in each state and elsewhere exists so that a private party creditor may formally establish the legal relationship between him/herself and a debtor. It allows for the creditor or secured party to register a perfected security interest, a lien essentially above all others, including government and the property of the debtor. And there's another thing in this universe, this world, you have duality because there's a particular gatekeeper, and there's others out there quite a bit that are trying to say that the straw man is not real, that the birth certificate is just made up. And you hear they're using terms that involve that deal with securities industry. There's classes for that as well. Your birth certificate is a form of a registered security, contrary to popular belief that some may say it's a bond, but it is a form of a bond. But the key is the mother of it. It's a registered securities instrument. It is an instrument. It's put on the specific type of paper. The government actually behind the scenes has a contract with a entity that makes that special type of paper, just like they print on the currency. And believe it or not, a friend of mine who's from out of state told me on his birth certificate, he wondered why it said American Banknote Company. It said that on there. This is the fact. It says, and other people have shown this in other videos that I've saw going over. But I wanted to say as well that some states, like in the state of Michigan, a friend of mine that told me he and some others were trying to file said they have an additional law where they're saying you can't file as the same party or same person. But what's going on is these gatekeepers that have minions and people that work there, because this information is kept on a need to know basis, or within corporations they have something called FYI, which is an acronym for your information or for your information only. They're not made aware, so they think it's a scam. And then you do have people who in years past were ill-informed with different procedures, that didn't properly take a legal class or take a business and law class in college to understand, since this information is hidden. Because keep in mind, when I learned about the private sector, when you learn about the private sector and how to read the private sector dealing with non-statutory common law, then you would be able to distinguish the difference without commingling. And if in case you're wondering what is commingling, commingling is mixing the public sector with the private sector. And I want to say there's people that get confused about the public sector and private sector. I had a friend years ago that said he heard, I think, a former president mention about the private sector. I know he was the argument I was trying to share with him, that there's a whole nother level that they don't want you to know about, that's called the private free sector. And the way I explain this, is I got information myself from someone who's more knowledgeable than myself in this area, because I had questions too, that they refer to it as the free private sector or private free sector. And a better distinction is, understand there's a difference between rich people and wealthy people. And if you look at it in that regard, like you have rich people who are public, who on the public side, they're getting involved in contracts. That's why they're getting themselves in trouble, because they're still public. They have not properly, they're not operating correctly, to kind of give you guys a better idea. And I'm not going to spend too much more time on that, but I'll let you all read between the lines. Now to go back to, I'm going to read some of the other definitions of natural person. Okay, this one from Wikipedia says, in jurisprudence, a natural person is, in legal meaning, one who has its own legal personality. That is an individual human being as opposed to a legal person. Then we click on it. It says legal person is any human or non-human entity. In other words, any human being, firm, or government agency that is recognized as having privileges and obligations, such as having the ability to enter into contracts, to sue, and to be sued. You see? So corporations can act as people. And one of the definitions I was reading, it stated the only things they can't do, a corporation can't vote and it can't run for office. But corporations can hold property, they act as trustees, they can do things of that nature. just to keep it simple. But this is how, when others out, gatekeepers out there that are trying to tell you the straw man thing is a rumor or a myth, that is not true. And this is why I'm going over these definitions, as many definitions actually to help prove that, to give a better distinction. And I'm reading different definitions so you just get various ideas. This definition says of natural person, it says a real human being as distinguished from a corporation, which is often treated at law as a fictitious person. Ooh, so this is another various version. See if I have another version. This is saying, featuring, I think this might be out of Black's Law, second edition, because I looked up natural person in the sixth edition, and it just says, I forget specifically, but it didn't really give a definition. It did state in there, it says see, it may have said see person or see natural person, but the second edition, may actually have this meaning right here, where it says, what is natural person? A human being naturally born versus a legally generated jurisdictional person, or juristic person. That's means basically artificial or go between. Like the when I read the definition earlier dealing with the straw man, a nominal front. Oh, didn't want me to click on that. Let me see if I can go to some of these other terminologies in here. Okay, we also have, it's also known as non de war. I guess this is Latin. It says war name, a fictitious name, Webster's Third New International Dictionary of the English Language, unabridged. LIT, war name, a name assumed by or a name assigned to a person engaged in some action or enterprise. It's like a form of business. So we go here, it says any fictitious name is a war name or nom de guerre. The U.S. government formally at war with you since the Amendatory Act, March 3rd, 1933, to the Trading with the Enemy Act. And the reason it's referencing to the Trading with the Enemy Act, October 6, 1917, this was 4 years approximately after the Federal Reserve Act was instituted in 1913. You can read further information online that March 9th, 1933, this is when this went into effect, because remember when they took the citizens' gold and silver in 1933, they made it illegal, declared it unlawful. You had to turn in your gold or silver. You had to face a $10,000 fine. And this is where they were getting ready to bring us. The citizens were pledged as collateral towards the debt. And I was explaining to a friend of mine that this is the reason why we had a U.S. Treasury years ago, that our own government had the ability to print its own money, but the Federal Reserve came in acting as a third party, saying, and they did this in other countries, and they act as known as a central bank, where they said, we can print your money for you, but they charge interest. They came up with the hustle basically, and you study the movie Money Masters and you learn about the Rothschild family. Amschel Bauer, before he sent his 5 sons around the world, he used to store precious metals for people, and then they would write out like certificates that would be like a form of currency, or like how can I put it, like a voucher to say you made a purchase. And then he started noticing that the people weren't recognizing, they weren't keeping up with it, so he turned it into a hustle, say, hey, I can make interest off of this. So he came up, created the whole Federal Reserve banking system. He sent his 5 sons around the world. I won't spoil it for you guys, but that's why I highly recommend watch the movie Money Masters. It will provide the proper education behind that, and the reason why it will go a lot more in depth with that as well. So let me go here, see if there's any other. Not going to really go over the notaries. Notaries play a critical role in the movement as well, because there's a lot of information. When I read through these documents ahead of time, before I do the videos, there's a plethora of information I could go over. As you see, it can branch into many different topics. But I want to prove with the terminology, straw man, legally, you have a legal person. It is real, contrary to popular belief or what you've been told by some of these gatekeepers and trolls. And keep in mind, some of these gatekeepers and trolls, what they want to do, mainly gatekeepers or agents, some of them haven't been taught or have been indoctrinated and brainwashed in the system to think a certain way and to convince you. But in other instances, there are some gatekeepers and agents, government agents, who are aware that this information is real. However, they don't want you becoming free. They want to keep you enslaved because in some way, shape, or form, they're making money benefiting off of keeping you brainwashed. That's why when you look at, who can I think of, those types of people that have control over other people that are manipulative, like sociopaths, psychopaths, they have tendencies to use fear tactics and things on their prey when they act on them to keep them afraid and spooked. And this is very similar to what gatekeepers do when some of them will try to sound very articulate to try to convince you that this information is real. Just because people have had a bad experience involving with this information does not mean that it's real. And everyone's individual circumstance or situation is not the same, where they try to lump people all in one category and say, hey, all the people that study this sovereign citizen information are radical people. This stuff is not true. Keep in mind, once again, they use that as an umbrella terminology to discredit people, to steer them away from looking into this information in depth. And you have to look at this in depth. You have to it's important to be intelligent too, because some people with a lower IQ are not going to comprehend this level of information, or let alone understand the encryptions behind how these words and how the laws work. And I'm still learning myself. It is very, very in depth. So I just wanted to kind of go over that and relay that. That's the reason why you have gatekeepers and agents out there who try to convince you that this information is inaccurate, when no, it's accurate. This is real. And this document that you're reading from, several of these documents are from Cracking the Code, second edition. It was put together by Barton Butts. He was a former investigative journalist, as well as Dan Benham. Dan Benham was based out of Michigan. I've never met them before, and I'm aware of that. Barton Butts did jail time for something, because you had some trolls that came to my channel, or one guy in particular, and said he got into trouble. Some people try to use that. Just because someone's been to jail before doesn't mean that the information that they were a scam artist or they were a scammer out there. There was something that he did that I guess that he created, that I would be aware that I'm not knocking them for doing it, but it was like some type of bond notes or something like that. And I understand that you still have rules and guidelines to follow, but some people, by him being an investigative journalist, he was testing the waters and doing different things. So people like that, and him and Winston Shrout, they sacrificed. But I can speak to some of a lot of the information they shared as far as the foundation and principles with certain things have held true to this day. Like when Winston Shrout said one of the purposes you file a UCC financing statement is to allow public officials and government entities that are generally going to be in your business district of your local county or city know that you're taking a private contract. You're putting it on public notice. So when you file the transaction statement, you are giving public notice when you do things correctly. And mind you, you have to look up your laws in your state. And once again, I did give a disclaimer: this is not legal advice. And also, I do not give private consultations, so do not contact me in regards to that. I will leave the comment section open for you all to basically, if you want to ask me, questions on there, and I'll do my level best for what I can if it's not too sensitive. But I'm sharing this information as a courtesy because I see a lot of misinformation and disinfo being put online. As you see, I'm showing you all actual documents you can read because this is a screen capture video, and I'm going to double check it. It's still recording. We're at 39 minutes so far. So going straw man or party, a third party who is put up in name only to take part in a transaction in name only. This right here says nominal party to a transaction, Black 6th edition. I have that edition. The term is also used in commercial and property context when a transfer is made to a third party. The straw man person in brackets simply for the purpose of retransferring to the transferor in order to accomplish some other purpose. The concept, and I was explaining this to a friend of mine, is that the corporation or the decedent estate is dead. It's an artificial being. And the government, it needed, when you enter into contracts, when you were born, your mother and father unknowingly signed you away as they acted as informants and signed you over to the state as wardens of the state. They informed on you unknowingly. You know, many people didn't understand or were not even aware. So the concept is that when you engage in contracts, as I went over earlier, your marriage license, if it's a beautician license, your military DD-214s, your state ID, your driver's license, doctor's license, your license to practice. I just found out about a year ago that people who, I guess, apply for their bar license to practice the law, and they say, I'm practicing, they have to go through the county. It's not a coincidence. The straw man or your legal person distinctly is put in, generally in all capital letters, even though there's those that argue, but generally speaking, when you're engaging in government contracts, it's done, and you have to read capitis diminutiu maxima. I'm gonna jump to real quick right here. This was online, by the way. I looked this up, and years ago, this is still even used to this day. There was a certain gatekeeper that out there, I'm not gonna say her name, she was trying to state they don't use this anymore. No, in the court system, I had a relative who told me it's archaic or whatever. That's the term he kind of used, that this terminology, which English language, from what I understand, don't quote me on it, comes out of Latin. That you even had an older version of English called Old English. This dealing with the specific language. It sounded like broken English from the English language that we speak. But capitis diminutiu maxima meant a maximum loss of status through the use of capitalization. This is legally. So you understand there's a distinction. And so generally when you receive these contracts things, I'm going to pull up like your bill. This is just a sample. It's going to generally come in all caps, all capital letters. This was a sample, as you can see, pulled up online. So there's no copyright infringement or anything. This is in reference to, because this video is for educational purposes. This is an example of a pay stub. This is a John Doe copy, right? As you can see clearly right here. It's generally going to be in all capital letters. Even if not behind the scenes in the computer system, the way it's coded, and this is all is legally. And the legal term they use in the court system for the straw man, and they also have referred to as legal person, is in lingus right here. And this is actually out of the Black's Law Dictionary. I'll go over real quick. It says, in lingus, I'll start from here, a creature of the law, an artificial being that's contrasted with a natural person applied to corporations, considered as deriving their existence entirely from the law. Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. See, 4th edition, 1951, hereafter. See if I had any other notes, but you guys can see right there. And there was another definition. I'm going to tell a story. There was a sister I know. She was, at least she lived down in Virginia. Her son, last time I was in touch with her, I heard she passed away. Rest in peace to her. I'm not going to say her name. God rest her soul. But when I was in touch with her, just not too very long ago, a couple years ago, I believe, just estimating, I had a long talk with her. She gave me an update that her son got hit up on a gun charge. This was down in Virginia. He also was a rapper. I met him before. I heard he had performed with Big Sean. I can't remember his name. I just knew him by one of his emails. He had Always Golden or something like that. But she was explaining to me he took a plea deal for the gun charge because you know many of you all you know how the court system works. If it goes to trial, then you run the risk of doing more time. So they convince you to take a plea deal, a plea bargain, so you would do less time. And she was explaining to me when she was debating with the judge in the court system. She told the judge, she said, I have power of attorney over my son, over him, and some other things that he was copywritten, something to that effect. And then she told me, this is a true story. At the time she said the judge responded, ship failed, and like a ship is a vessel. And then I'm not showing it in this video because, like I said, there's a plethora of information. The laws are encrypted. But years ago, when I was studying under one of my mentors, when I first got in the movement independently, who had been to court on numerous cases, he was a judge. This is a true story here in Detroit. He had told me had actually put him on a form of a do not detain list, actually, because he was stating he didn't have a contract with her and some other things I won't go into. But he was told me in Title IX of the United States Code, they consider you a vessel of the United States. A vessel, and you know how I'm going to read this definition right here. The res is tied in with the straw man. So mind you, follow what I just went over. Is this? I'm going to start from this middle section, and I guess this is Latin right here, letting you know it comes from Latin. It says a thing. What is a thing? They made a movie some years ago called The Thing. And what did we just get finished talking about earlier? If you were paying close attention to artificial entities and corporations, it says starting from here, for example, in a suit involving a captured ship, the seized vessel is the res. Let's read this again. For example, in a suit involving a captured ship. So when the judge said ship failed, that means I said they captured his ship. He was speaking in code. But if you never have taken a legal class before, which I honestly haven't, I've just learned just from studying through the years, getting different people who've gone to court to tell me about their experience. And I was fortunate enough to meet people who were very knowledgeable. But when the sister told me this, I said, whoa, I said they captured his vessel. And that happened when he signed the plea deal, when he gave over his signature, which is his property, uh, and everything over. And they do the stuff where they charge the bond, the QSIP, and they go into the CRIS accounts, which is connected. This is the court registry input system or something. It's an acronym for. I just know the first two letters, court registry. The IS, it's like an input system, is connected to the Federal Reserve. So that's how they tap into your trust account. And a sister who, when I was assisting with these private conference calls with several months ago, based down in Atlanta, Georgia, she stated she had to deal with an attorney for a situation she was involved in with the accident, or something to follow up with, maybe dealing also with malpractice. Um, and she stated that the attorney told her they referred to her legal person as trust accounts. So there's something else I found out I won't go over talk about right now, as I'm still learning myself, but that was confirmation right there. So I get reports and testimony from people that share various sources that this education is very real. And this part, before I get ready to shut things down, this particular page of Cracking the Code, it says industrial system has set it up, starting from the top, that only way for men, women, and children to access industrial goods and services, wow, this is right on point, of the nation is through a nominal third party, a frontman, a dummy, a public corporation of one, a corporately colored juristic person. See this? These are not my words. This is in the document. A straw man, a utility through which said goods and services may be transmitted. So transmitting utility, it transmits from one entity to the other. So when you enter into these different contracts, whether it be your DD-214 military papers, your beautician license, driver's license, barber license, marriage license, those are contracts. It's a front. And a lot of times you have to go before commercial registry. The Secretary of State is also also it's the state version of the county of the local register. They have various names. The State Department. So you, whether knowingly or unknowingly, you sign in order to receive goods and services. They also refer to them as benefit privileges when you're not operating in the proper capacity. When that deals with the private sector with status correction, that's a whole, another topic within itself. Just to kind of go over. I'm gonna skip down. It says because the straw man has no body, and because you are the one actually benefiting from the consumption of use of the industrial goods and services of the nation, because prior to redemption you do not hold public title to your straw man. You are the one responsible for discharging the public liability associated with the benefits that come to you in the name of your straw man. See, they didn't tell us. This is why in Rob Ryder's channel, who some of you are familiar with or know of, he has a video that telling you to claim the name. And there's paperwork that I file myself, other things I'm looking into to also lay claim to, but it's important because as you can see what I'm reading, they made us liable even for the national debt as well. They don't tell you that there's other documents that I have. They put everybody together with the registration of the birth certificate. It's sent to Washington, D.C. after you're born. The Department of Commerce has a job that they deal with it, and the Federal Reserve takes out a loan where they pledge you as collateral. Remember, a registered security or securities instrument bond has to have collateral. It has to have an asset that's backing that particular bond. Who is the asset that was pledged? Is we the people. Then the bankers, because it put the nation in debt, they took out loans from various countries, and that's why a lot of debt is owed to China, because China said that we'll front the bonds, but this was a whole system set up to capture everyone legally through a subversive manner. But however, there's a loophole too within the law that infants are considered handicapped. We aren't legally competent to make a decision at the time. So this was also done through trickery and deception. But however, the way the law works, as I read earlier, the law is very precise, and you have to know about how to go back and capture and claim these things. So I do understand that's the difficulty wearing this movement. It is not a silver bullet or one size fits all formula. There's some people that get involved, say, I just want to access the money, the $1 million. How do I get to it? And you have to lay the groundwork. And I did a lot of reading just to give you all a little background about myself when I first got involved in the movement, when I attended those classes years ago that I brought up earlier. And I followed the blueprint ever since, dealing with the contracts, various types of contracts that I went over. And it's also called practicing limited contact. The more you can limit that and do business through different entities. You want to own nothing but control everything. That deals with trust. That's a whole nother topic within itself. I won't touch into that. But this is mainly to prove that the straw man theory, as some gatekeepers are trying to say, is not real. It's just made up. No, I'm debunking that right now. And I'm showing these are actual documents. Once again, this is out of Cracking the Code, 2nd edition. Published some years ago. It says a straw man is a construct of law, is a fictitious entity, is a person, and an artificial person is a juristic person, is a dummy, sin is a dummy corporation, is a public corporation. And see, right on point again, a public vessel. And in Title 9, look up Title 9 of the United States Code, a vessel of the United States, because the brother I was speaking with that years ago, he helped mentor me. Big shout out to him. I won't say his name. I ran into not that long ago. He's still around, but he was a great help. And he stated that in Title 9, he would tell the judge he's not a vessel of the United States. But they use the terminology of the res, going over the definition. See, it says, for example, in a suit involving a captured ship, the seized vessel. Actually, in court, everything is, believe it or not, is a suit, because it's about commerce. It's about the charge. So going back over the tie-in with the straw man, the term natural person It's distinct. It refers to a living human being. I'm going to see if I can find the one that went over legal person. Okay. I'm going to click on legal person. Okay, I did read that definition earlier, so you all can, see from the screen capture. So it says this part right here, there are two kinds of legal entities, human and non-human. So for those gatekeepers out there that try to say, oh, once again, the straw man thing is a rumor, it's a myth, it's made up, it's a fallacy, it's bogus. No, that is not true. It's inaccurate. I'm going over showing evidence right now. And this is off of Wikipedia. Very credible sources. There's some people that try to say, oh, you can't believe what's on the internet. You can also check the Black's Law Dictionary. You can also check certain encyclopedias as well. Like I like to cross-reference information like a research paper. You have to cite your sources. That was a requirement by, when I had teachers in high school or college, you have to cite your sources. And this is evidence, Nowadays, people, internet is a part of life, so this is very credible. Jurisdictional persons, or juristic is saying, and this are artificial legal, let's see if I can find some other things. Legal personhood is a prerequisite to legal capacity. Saying a jurisdictional or artificial person has a legal name, has certain rights, protections, privileges, responsibilities, and liabilities in law. So this is important to read, to go over this material, ladies and gentlemen, out here. And it says artificial personality allows that entity to be considered under law. This is according to law. It's saying right here, from its individual members, they may sue and be sued, enter contracts, incur debt, and own property. Entities with legal personality may also be subjected to certain legal obligations, such as the payment of taxes. An entity with legal personality may shield its members from personal liability. Okay, it was another definition I saw, something I saw earlier that made a very good point. I don't see it because there's a plethora of information before I shut this video down. But lastly, let's see what time we're at. Wow, we're almost at an hour. So this is high-powered, action-packed information. If you guys follow me so far, I want to thank you for joining me in this webinar screen capture. The title of this video is Straw Man, Artificial Person, Is It Real? These are some other notes that I took on the side. Corporate fiction. I went over the N-lingus, legal person, legal title, lost at sea. Yeah, they consider you lost at sea. It's the concept because we're operating under admiralty. Admiralty is military. A maritime is law of the seas. So it's 14th Amendment citizens. I briefly read over the Trading with the Enemy Act. They consider every U.S. citizen an enemy of the states. There's some more information I could go over. I was explaining that yesterday to a good friend of mine. The relevance of that, and I'll just leave it there, but I'm giving you all the ability to definitely do your own research and homework. But lastly, I wanted to go over the symbolism from the movie Wizard of Oz, and I'll pull this document online. You can look it up. There's other websites that go over this information too that are still online. I did look up several in the past, but to keep it simple, because I've covered a lot of information so far. The Wizard of Oz, it says an allegory, parable, is the expression of truths about human conduct and experience by means of symbolic fictional figures and actions. Such was the movie The Wizard of Oz, an allegory of the state of affairs we now live in today, an allegory of the unfolding New World Order that was instituted in America via the stock market crash of 1929 and the bankruptcy of the United States in 1933. The setting of this allegory is in Kansas, the heartland of America, the geographical center of the United States of America, USA. In came the twister, I'm going to skip over some and go to some key points. When they landed in Oz, Dorothy commented to her little dog Toto. I hear Toto is an Italian word for that means everything. or like you total or you tally up something, by the way. After the bankruptcy of the United States, Kansas was no longer Kansas anymore. This was symbolic, as they also did the same similar thing to, I was explaining, to the states too. Are actually our political bodies, but you do have a difference with the physical land, like the Republic of Michigan, or the Republic of Ohio, or if you've heard the Commonwealth states, that goes back to, common law. Because what's happened is the corporate government, the legal government, has enslaved the lawful government. But all corporations are supposed to be under, and I'm saying supposed to be under, public law. But some of them have become super conglomerates and hire high-powered lawyers and just do what they want to do. But however, there's a blueprint to how this entire system was set up from the very get-go and through contracts. Like, there's a difference between, like, the University of Michigan, when it has a of. I knew Michigan, University of Michigan is a corporate school. Michigan State, even though it's corporate as well, more so represented symbolically the physical land, dealing with Michigan. That's why it's more of a blue collar school, more grassroots kind of a way. Just using that as an example, even though they both have been, incorporated and everything. I'm just kind of giving you guys a point of reference, an idea. So it says a 2 capital letter federal postal designation that is part of the federal zone, designated by the zone improvement zip. That's what the zip code stands for. It's the acronym for zone improve or improvement code, established by the bankrupt United States, in 1933. Dorothy and Toto were now in this state. The terms in this state and state are deceptively defined for tax jurisdiction purposes as the District of Columbia, aka the United States, this 10-mile square radius of Washington, D.C. I'm just adding that in, but that's in other documents you all can read up on through your Social Security card. Every U.S. citizen is acting as a franchisee. It says, further, in the 1930s, the all capital letters written named Strawman, the newly created artificial person that has no brain and speaks or acts for itself. That's what represented the scarecrow. Was once upon a time sovereign. You and me was created while Americans were confused and distracted by the commotion caused by the introduction of the New World Order of communistic socialism to figure out that they had a straw man with which to contend. The scarecrow identified the straw man persona for Dorothy. Thusly, some people without brains do an awful lot of talking. Of course, I'm not bright about doing things. In this classic song, If Only I Had a Brain, the scarecrow slash straw man succinctly argued, I'd unravel every riddle for every individual in trouble or in pain. Individual, this is another definition too that's important. United States government employee. I'm going to go say in reference, I did give a disclaimer, and under the Fair Use Act, because these codes are copywritten, this is for commentary and educational purposes for what I'm going over. And this is a public document that is public domain that I did pull off the internet. As you can see, I'm still online. The Internal Revenue Code and all state codes are in harmony with the above definition of individual by reference only. A corporation of one is an artificial person constructed by law, not a living, breathing man or woman. An individual is a public corporate persona existing only in the public government domain, having been created by law, not by God. That's the difference. Alrighty, let me see if there's some other things that's important before I shut it down. I'm going to skip over that section. Translation. Once we discover that our straw man exists and that we have co-signed for him, signing by accommodation, political and legal mysteries, complexities, and confusions are resolved. When we take title to our straw man UCC1 financing statement, we protect ourselves from any liabilities that we might otherwise occur. And I kind of went over earlier how some states are confused. They have gatekeepers where they're lying to, they're misinformed, and they have a law now in Michigan, I hear, where they're saying you can't file as the same person, but they're confused. You're actually supposed to be able to make a distinct filing versus the lowercase versus the all caps name. That goes back to this document I read earlier. You have to read. This was pulled up online between Capitis Diminutiu Minima and Capitis Diminutiu Maxima, by the way, because and this is legally. By no means, I did give a disclaimer once again, this is not legal advice, but you have to understand that certain terminologies and things apply to different applications legally within the judicial system. So think of it, look at it as that way. Okay, in this paragraph, the tin man, our taxpayer identification number, is a hollow man of tin, a vessel or vehicle, newly created code words for our straw man. See, they created other words, you know, to keep everybody confused. Okay, let's see if I skip down. Just as the straw man has no brains. I'm looking for other things. Also, person. The precise definition of the term person is therefore necessary to identify those to whom the 14th Amendment, remember I went over that earlier, dealing with the Trading with the Enemy Act, excuse me, affords its protections and liabilities, since the 14th Amendment expressly applies to persons. A straw man is a person with a fictitious name written in legalese language, foreign to rules of English grammar, flesh and blood men and women with names, titles written in hand cursive with the initial letters only capitalized are not persons, even though they are referred to as natural persons at times. Yep, that's your most powerful possession, is your signature. And that's an important element, part of entering into contracts too. So I'll give you guys the ability, I've gone over a lot of information so far. I may have to pick up later, maybe going into a part 2, but I just wanted to go over in this video evidence and give you guys a plethora of information titled Strawman Artificial Person, Is It Real? And yes, my conclusion from what I've gone over so far, if you follow me so far, that this information is highly accurate. Yes, some things may not work for some people out there, because this is not a silver bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all formula. You have to do a lot of reading, and you have to have a high IQ or high comprehension level to understand or comprehend this information, because reading is comprehension. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for joining me. If you did take the time to watch this video, you can subscribe at Dorsey's Resource on YouTube. Don't forget to click the notification bell button, ring the bell. If you haven't subscribed, don't forget to smash the thumbs up button. If you want to follow me, you're welcome. I put out videos on my Facebook, Dorsey's Resource Facebook page, as well as on my Twitter handle, at Dorsey's Resource. Until next time, thank everyone. Thank you all for joining me. Everyone have a blessed week and awesome time. Take care.